All right. Well, welcome everybody. We're here for another training session for United Way 211, facilitated by Call for Justice. We have a fantastic speaker with us today, Martha Delaney, who I'm going to introduce right now, and then she's going to talk about the Volunteer Lawyers Network. Martha Delaney is the Deputy Director of the Volunteer Lawyers Network, and she started with VLN in September of 2003. A year later, she was named a Rising Star by the Minnesota Law and Politics magazine. She's written nationally published articles and brochures regarding pro bono work, including working effectively with pro bono clients. Previously, Martha was in private practice in Wisconsin, where she worked with the Jefferson County Child Support Agency in addition to her private practice. In 1994, she and her business partner received Legal Action of Wisconsin's Pro Bono Law Firm of the Year Award, it's a very short name, in recognition for their volunteer work. She graduated from the University of Wisconsin Law School in 1991, and she's a graduate of the College of Holy Cross out in Massachusetts, in which she majored in physics in 1986. She's volunteered for the Indian Child Welfare Law Center, the Crazy Horse Lawsuit website, Common Ground Meditation Center, and various restorative justice workshops. Please help me welcome Martha Delaney. And bearing in mind, remember our rule, ask your questions away as we go along. Yesterday's session turned into sort of a collaborative function where people were coming up with ideas in addition to their questions, and it was really quite helpful. Jillian walked away with a lot of assignments on her computer.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Well, and thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here and to meet you in person. We refer to 211 so often, and excuse me, you're really the backbone of referrals in our state and give so many people hope and direction where they just otherwise wouldn't have it. So thank you for inviting me. And I, just to kind of underline what Ellie said, I really would like to take questions as they come along, because I think that way it kind of keeps the flow going more. And really, I want to make sure that what I'm providing is helpful to you. And if you're asking questions, then I know that I can be addressing your specific concerns. So thanks. So I'd like to start with the 5 top things about Volunteer Lawyers Network that kind of set us apart from other legal services providers. So the first thing is that we protect the basic human needs. We protect the safety, shelter, sustenance, and family relationships of those in poverty. About 5 years ago, if I'd been here, I would have told you that we basically provide any type of legal service that people would have. But about 5 years ago, we had a strategic plan where we realized that we had limited resources, and we wanted to make sure that they were addressing the most essential needs of people in poverty. And so that's when we started focusing on those issues which we could tie directly to these basic needs. I could just go from the... So the second thing to know about us is that we do it with volunteers. There are many legal services agencies in the country. Some are staffed. The attorneys on staff provide the services. Volunteer Lawyers Network, we are not providing the direct services, but rather we are training and we're recruiting and then training volunteer attorneys to do this. And I love that for many reasons. One is that we're able to bring the vast resources of the private bar to bear on issues, critical issues of poverty in our community. But also because so many lawyers go to law school wanting to help people, wanting to make a difference, and then in their daily jobs aren't able to do that as much, or at least in the way that they thought they'd be able to. And so we're able to provide a container through which very talented, experienced, and dedicated people can give back to the community. So last year, we provided more than 9,000 legal services, which you'll see later on. The services range from legal advice alone all the way up to full representation services, which I'll cover a little bit later. Okay. And when you include the families and children of those that we helped, we see that we impacted more than 25,000 lives in each year. Again, 5 years ago, if I'd been here, I would have told you that we exclusively work in Hennepin County, but as a result of more awareness of the legal needs of people in rural counties, we've been expanding our services to greater Minnesota as well. And so right now, about 70% of our services are in Hennepin County and 30% are in other counties. And one of the other things that sets us apart is that our income eligibility guidelines go higher. We can serve a greater number of people when we're doing advice and brief services because we'll go up to 300% of the federal poverty guideline. We did that because we'd really like to help those in the working poor who still don't have access to legal services but may not qualify for the other legal aid programs or legal assistance programs. And so our staff is made up of intake specialists who, like you, are talking with people on the phone, figuring out if they qualify for our services, and if not, trying to get them a good legal referral for other services. We also have case placement coordinators who act kind of as the matchmakers. So they're the people that they know the issue that the client has, and they know the issue that the attorney wants to help with, and so they pair them. And then we have the attorneys, the resource attorneys. And again, their work is not to provide direct services, although they might do some in order to keep abreast of the law. But their role is more to create the programs, create the resources, and act as mentor attorneys to our volunteers, who, while our volunteers are among the most experienced and trained and high law firm paid volunteers in the state, many of them may not have direct experience with the law as it relates to people in poverty. And so our attorneys will answer questions and give them technical advice on that. So yesterday, when I was with your colleagues, I looked around the room at one point and I really thought people were going to start crying. And I felt really bad because I know and want to thank you in advance. I know it's so complicated to try to keep abreast of which organizations provide which legal services. And so at VLN, we've become especially confusing because it used to be I could tell you we serve people in Hennepin County and we do everything. And now I can't tell you that anymore. I can tell you that we do certain types of areas of law, and depending on the county in which you live, we will provide it to a certain extent or not provide it to a certain extent. And so I want to spend a couple minutes going over this handout, which is something that we use internally to help us remember what we do. I refer to this anytime a staff member comes up to me and asks me a question about what we do or what we don't do. And so basically you've got at the top, you've got our legal issues, admin law, bankruptcy, adversary proceedings, civil consumer, et cetera, along the top. And then along the left-hand side, you have the counties, all the counties in the state of Minnesota. And so the way this chart works is, let's say I get a call from someone and they're in Washington County and they want they want help with an adoption case on a full representation basis. So I would go to the Washington County row, starting on the left, and then I would intersect it to family law, and then there's full rep adoption. See that?
Martha, am I correct that the first 7 counties are the metro area?
Yes, thank you. Yep. Yes, it's organized alphabetically, but the 7 county metro area is on the top, and not in alphabetical order, actually. So there you'll see that actually we provide full representation on adoption issues to people whose household income is at or below 125% of the federal poverty guideline. So if I had a caller from someone in Douglas County and I wanted to know if I could do a bankruptcy for them, I would look at Douglas County, which is a little further down, and I would go over to bankruptcy, and it says, now that square is white, so that means we would not help them. And basically why we wouldn't help them is because when we're arranging or figuring out which services we're providing, we're working with other legal services providers in the state. And so if there's someone else doing a service, many times we won't do that same service. We'll refer to someone else. We're really, all of the legal services programs, I think, are really trying to have a coordinated response to the legal needs in poverty. And so many times we're really working to not duplicate services. Many times, no matter how many of us there are, there's still more need, and so there are times when we do both do a certain service area, but that's why we wouldn't do bankruptcy, for example, in Douglas County.
But you would give phone advice, right?
Yep, so if you go over then to one column over where it says phone advice, we would give phone advice to a person in Douglas County whose household income was at or below 300% of the federal poverty guideline. Does anyone have any recent examples of something that we could just see if the chart works for you? I think yesterday there was a question about a person who spoke Spanish who needed help with an immigration issue. Is that right? Yeah. And so actually I would like to highlight Spanish because that's one of the few exceptions, the only exception to the rule that the top row is organized by legal service. The exception is Spanish services actually is organized by the language of the speaker. And so if someone calls you and their first language is Spanish, even if they do speak English, I would recommend that you refer them to our phone advice or clinic, actually to our phone advice to receive assistance. The clinic actually is not something we tend to refer to. It's something that the phone advice will refer to, but we would sort that out on our end. So.
And is that different than LARED?
That is the same thing as LARED.
Okay,
Yep.
all right.
The Spanish Legal Services Program, formerly known formerly known as Línea Legal Latina, but we've changed our name.
And so for everyone on your training materials, if you go to page 2, you'll see we talk about the Spanish-speaking clients, and there are always exceptions to everything, but I'm going to say that a relatively hard and fast rule is if you get a Spanish-speaking client who calls and it appears statewide, this is the number you should send them to LARED, which is sort of be your automatic referral. That helps screen things out pretty quickly. So you can give them a fallback referral to Homeline, for example, because Homeline has, or excuse me, not Homeline, lawhelpmn.org. Lawhelpmn.org has a Spanish version on its website. So that would be your fallback, but your primary would be to LARED. Okay, go ahead.
Great, thank you. Great. So here is a breakdown, just for your information, a breakdown of the residents of the people that we served last year. So you'll see that it's still mainly Hennepin County, but we really are reaching out more to some of the other counties. And one thing that's interesting about this is that the look of this graph doesn't look much different from the past couple years, but what is different is that the numbers of people that we're serving in each of the counties keeps growing, which is something we hope continues. Okay. So the second of our 3 main eligibility criteria is the financial, and I've kind of already been referring to that in the chart. Mainly we look at 125, 200, or 300% of the federal poverty guidelines. Is that something that you screen for when you're doing referrals or not?
We mentioned it, but it's a little hard because there's such a gap between, from 125 to 300.
Yeah.
And that you have to guesstimate, if you've made about this much. And so.
Right, that makes sense. So that wouldn't really be so much, so you could say you might qualify for these services. The other thing that we looked at was how can we make the best use of our attorney time? Because money is not the only thing that's limited, but our attorney time is limited. And so we looked at in any area in which a brief legal service, such as a phone call, writing a letter to a landlord, or drafting an answer form in a complaint, something like that, any time where that was shown to have a good chance of resolving the case, that's what we start with first, is the brief service. And then if that doesn't work, then we'll look at paneling. If they're income eligible, we'll look at paneling for full representation. We'll look at getting them an attorney to help with on a full representation basis. So brief service is kind of like our main focus. Advice, though, is really important if someone, for example, needs to be told they don't have a case, which I'm sure you get some of those, or that their case doesn't have merit, or, for example, maybe there is a possible solution through the legal system, but really it might be better to solve their problem in another way. Often, legal advice, it's faster. They can just go to a clinic. It's in person. So that could be the preferred method in some cases. So here's the breakdown last year. And I want to point out that the legal advice, also includes phone advice, and that's a big part of our service is providing phone advice, which I particularly like because the client can still be in the comfort of his or her own home, and we can do that all across the state. I mean, it's very easy to provide phone advice to someone in Bemidji, not so easy to provide an in-person service. And then the third criteria for us to determine if a case is something we'll take is the actual issue. And so I have a list later where I can go through issue by issue, depending on which issues you have the most interest in. But just to point out, one of the biggest challenges of running a volunteer attorney program is having the right mix. You've got this many clients on one hand, you've got this many attorneys on the other, and it would be great if we always had the same amount. There are some areas of law where we have more clients than attorneys. Bankruptcy, family, Spanish legal services, short notice housing, full rep housing cases. And so we're really looking to try to expand our attorney base. But there are other programs where we don't have enough clients, which is amazing. I mean, now, if an attorney says they want to help us with patent law, we're going to say, actually, we don't have any clients that need that. But if an attorney, there are a lot of attorneys who know, for example, employment law or tax law that really want to help, and we so far don't have enough clients. And actually, so what I'd like to do is spend a couple minutes on one of your handouts that looks like this.
This is what you were given today.
And so this handout is really areas where we would like more clients. And so if you're not sure, of a place and you're thinking, I don't know if this would be helpful or not, these are some. I could take off my necklace if that would be better. Okay. So bankruptcy, we're really looking for clients statewide. And this isn't to say that they'll get services immediately. They might have to wait 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks, but we're really gearing up, and we've I think last year we provided almost twice as many bankruptcies as we had the prior year. This is a huge need for many people across the state. I mean, I'm sure you see this on a daily basis, where things were going great until someone lost a job, or someone died, or someone had an unexpected health crisis. And so we're seeing a real upturn in the numbers needing bankruptcies. One of our clients last year, she was going to school, working part-time, working full-time, going to school part-time. She has 3 kids, and her sister was helping her with the care of her kids. And one day when she was at school, there was a fire in her apartment, destroyed everything in her apartment, and caused $30,000 worth of damage to the building. And the landlord sued her and got a judgment for $30,000. So, he had a right to that judgment, I suppose, but if that judgment had held, her wages would have been garnished for who knows how long, and she would have been reduced really to years of grinding poverty without any ability to make a better life for herself and her kids, as she was trying so hard to do. And we were able to help her get a bankruptcy, and she was able to start all over again. She was able to get back her car, I think something, and get to work. So the bankruptcy boy, and actually in the last 5 months of 2012, when we first started measuring the discharge amounts of our clients, the amount that the bankruptcy erased or got rid of, it was $1.4 million. And these are all people who are at or below 200% of the federal, this isn't like, I don't know, the big banks or whatever that get bankruptcies. I mean, these are people who that money is going to be helping them kind of make their daily necessity payments. So anyway, so bankruptcy, full rep, bankruptcy advice, we're looking for more clients. Birth certificates, that's another area where an attorney, actually with a very short amount of time, can make a huge difference for someone. We have attorneys who will help clients get birth certificates when they have no proof of identity. And there's actually there's a law apparently that applies in every state that if you have no proof of first of all, if you have no proof of your identity, how are you going to get your identity? You can't just, like any of us could probably get our birth certificate, but if you have no other proof of identity, there's a law that says if a lawyer says you are who you say you are, then they will reissue your birth certificate to you, and you can get your proof of identity, which allows you to get a job, which allows you to get housing or public benefits. And so that's a service that our attorneys are doing. In that case, actually, you would not refer directly to us, though. you would refer to Mike at Alliance of the Streets, and they could just call him directly to find out what they need to do. If it's an example of a case where they have something that they can get it on their own, he'll help them get it on their own, and if it's not, then he'll refer to our program.
Do you deal with a lot of those cases for birth certificates?
We do about, off the top, I have the figures here, but off the top of my head, I'd say we do about maybe 150 a year. We have 2 clinics, one in Minneapolis and one in St. Paul, and it's a growing service. It also is provided. Have you heard of Project Homeless Connect? You probably heard of that.
Yes.
So we and other attorneys offer that service there too. It's a huge service. It's a popular service at that clinic too.
I'd be interested in hearing, what frequency are you getting calls about bankruptcy? Are people thinking they need to go into bankruptcy?
A lot of
that-
For a
times.
couple times a week to volunteer lawyers that work for bankruptcy.
I think a lot of people feel comfort in the fact that they are lawyers because they think they have to go to a lawyer to get any bankruptcy representation. And they're you're one of the main places that do come up for any legal office. Otherwise, the majority of the time, it's a consumer affairs type of agency, and they're a little unsure if they want to take that because they're not legal offices.
Interesting. Yeah. No, that makes sense.
And are you sending them directly to VLN, or are you sending some of them to some of the clinics at the courthouse? On your training materials, we've listed clinics that are walk-in clinics, and they don't need to call to go to the federal courthouse, correct? They can
Correct,
just show
right.
up. Have we been referring people to any of those clinics?
Some, but mostly they want a phone number.
Pardon me?
Mostly they want a phone number.
Mostly they want a phone number. Okay, all right.
Something else that might be useful, though, we just launched our online intake form, which includes bankruptcy. It doesn't include every service, but includes bankruptcy, family, housing, and criminal expungement. And it's a form that you can actually do on your phone. And so if they want to apply for our services, they can call the phone number, or they could complete the form on their phone or on a computer. Obviously, it's also available on a computer. The courthouse clinic offers the advantage of an immediate answer. If they want to know, should I file for bankruptcy? Is this the right time? Or is the bankruptcy appropriate given this? Or will it discharge these types of debts? And they really want an answer quickly, then the walk-in clinic is what I'd recommend. The phone advice tends to be about between 2 and 6 weeks out. And actually getting a bankruptcy attorney, if they qualify income-wise and issue-wise, would be probably about 2 to 3 months out. We have paralegals that help, and one reason it's a little bit longer is because before they get paired with an attorney, we have paralegals help them gather their paperwork. So once they get to the attorney, it goes pretty efficiently.
So the online intake form, you just mentioned some specific legal services that they help with for that.
Yes.
You'll be able, could you say those again?
Absolutely, and it might even be somewhere in the materials. So we, bankruptcy, family, housing, and criminal expungement. The nice thing about having criminal expungement and housing on that form is that people can get information about those services without waiting for our intake specialists. Our phone times right now the amount of time that a person is holding to wait to speak with someone in person can be a half hour. We've had some people waiting more. The online form is obviously available anytime, as opposed to just 10 to 1, a very limited period of time. But if they do the online form, they will get that information really quick. So criminal expungement and housing, we typically have people go to a clinic or a seminar first. And if they've waited half an hour to speak to someone and we say, yeah, well, what you want to do is go to this clinic, they're kind of upset, and understandably so. I mean, they want an intake. So I like the fact that at least some people who have access to the phone or the computer can get that information without waiting so long to speak with one of us. And one quick thought about that. When you're referring people to VLN, if they are more interested in calling us, and if you have the time to tell them this, I would recommend that you tell them to call between 11 and 12. I don't know what it is, but the middle of the shift is always the least busy.
Not 10 to 1.
10 to 1 is our intake hours.
Okay.
And so you should give them our intake hour. I don't mean to say that you shouldn't, but I would recommend, you could say, yeah, their intake hours are 10 to 1, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday. I'd recommend you call in the middle of that time because it tends to be a little bit less busy.
So you mentioned that people who call for housing and criminal expungement usually just send them to the clinic.
Yes.
Do you have anything in your hold message saying that?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
And it's amazing. I don't know if you have this.
They don't really listen?
Right.
Right. Yeah.
It's too bad. I wish, anyway, yeah. And
Imagine that. What?
Weird.
I want to, at this point, take a quick moment to.
Can I just interrupt you real
Oh,
quick?
yes, please.
Okay, just everyone, if you go to page 6 of the, and I know that it's here on this, on the PowerPoint, but if you go to page 6 of the PowerPoint handout, you'll see the VLN intake options that Martha just talked about on the top slide. And you might want to put a big circle around that for the online intake with all those categories, because I did not get those into your written materials. So that's one thing. And the other thing I wanted to just point out before we run too far is on page 5 of the training materials that Call for Justice created. We've got the walk-in clinics that has the bankruptcy clinic listed. And I think that it is important that we bear in mind this, okay? You're getting callers, many of whom are in distress, yes? And many of them who want something. They need something to make them feel like they're dealing with their problem once they've come to grips with it, and that they can have something to deal with in terms of action. And it sounds like they call VLN, they do the number, they queue up, but there's still going to be time before they're going to be able to speak to a lawyer. Mm-hmm. And so for that reason, that's why your training materials are organized by scheduled clinics and walk-in clinics. And I think that it is very important, the bankruptcy clinic, and it's going to take somebody to have to take part of time off from work, or somebody to have to get to downtown Minneapolis or St. Paul. But it gives them the ability to, once a week at least, be able to go and talk to lawyers, real life. And I think that when you're making the referrals, it is important to let them know about these options that they have. Certainly we don't want to downplay the role of VLN by calling what VLN can do and all of that stuff. But remember, if they're in crisis, which most people are by the time they've reached the bankruptcy stage, thank you, let's make sure they know that they've got the, and by the way, tomorrow, if you really want to talk to a lawyer, you can go downtown and this is where you go. Okay, thanks. I just wanted, before we veered off so far, thanks.
Right.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah,
Martha?
please.
On the online intake form for the family issues, is that divorce and child support and enforcement?
Yep. It is, to answer your question. The one issue that is not included is adoption, because it was so complicated and we don't get as many of those every year. Just so you know, we don't provide full rep services on child support or maintenance alone or parental termination, for example, but we do offer phone advice. And so people, or at the family law clinic, they could also go to the family law clinic. So when they're completing the form will tell them that. The form will say, we don't offer full representation, but if you would like to continue with the form, we can provide you with phone advice on that issue.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good. One other thing I wanted to mention about bankruptcy actually is related to the top of the page, going back to this handout, where it says letters to creditors. Bankruptcy is one of the most, between bankruptcy and family, that's probably, it's a really, really high percentage of our services. There are many people who would like a bankruptcy, who would benefit from a bankruptcy, who we won't provide a bankruptcy for. And that's because, again, we're looking kind of at triage. With the attorneys that we have, how can we make the most difference possible in the lives of people asking for our services? And so there are certain situations where we will not provide someone a bankruptcy service, but instead we'll provide them with the service called letters to creditors. And our intake staff do not tell them that. It's always the attorney that tells them that. But just so that you know, for example, if all of their income is something like Social Security, which is, according to the law, not something that a creditor can garnish, those people we will tend to say, no doubt you can benefit from a bankruptcy, but we need to help those people whose income can be garnished by law. And so we will often tell them, the service we'll provide you is letters to creditors, and in that service, an attorney will write the person's creditors and say, all of these person's income and assets are collection proof. Please stop contacting the person and please charge off your debt. I don't know how many people do that, but and by law, any debt collector is required to then stop harassing the person. And I bet you have heard many stories about how bad that harassment can get. It's just amazing what debt collectors say on the phone.
Well, and to dot connect here, remember we learned about garnishment way back in session 2. So at tab 2 of your very detailed notebooks, if you go to tab 2, page 2, you'll see that we talked about garnishment there, just so as a reminder. So, okay.
And then on the other hand, though, there are some people who we will elevate as, yeah, you really need this service, we'll prioritize you. That would be someone, for example, whose utilities are about to get shut off because of their debts, or someone who can't get to work because their driver's license has been suspended because of their debt. So we have 6 or 7 categories that we'll elevate. Again, I'm not saying this to ask you to remember it at all, but just so you kind of know. And if you ever want to kind of see what the criteria are, you can go to that online intake form and you can actually see us asking those questions. Do you receive Social Security income or old age Social Security? And we kind of take them through that triage, if you're curious. So,
Martha,
yes.
You can lose your driver's license because of debt?
Well, yes, a very specific debt, though. If you are involved in a car crash and you do not have car insurance, the other person can sue you personally for whatever injuries they might have. And if you do not enter into a payment if the person gets a judgment and you do not enter into a payment plan that meets their satisfaction or meets a judge's approval, your driver's license will be suspended. And we get a fair amount of those. I thought that might happen to Zoe, but actually it was something else that happened to Zoe this time around.
Thanks,
So,
Martha.
yeah. And then going down this list a little bit more, the Consumer Legal Service Line. This is a program I would very much like to highlight. This is a statewide program, and actually Jillian did a wonderful brochure for us to help us publicize it. When a person has been sued for debt, collections, usually a collections lawsuit, many times they might have a defense, they might want to assert their defense, but will lose their rights to do that unless they serve an answer on the other side within 20 days. And at VLN, we see many firms that know that bank on the fact that a sizable proportion of those people that they serve with this paperwork will not answer. And so it's very easy, very cost-effective for them to get judgments and then garnish the person. Does that make sense what I just said, kind of? So in other words, they'll buy. We have in our midst, agent or companies that will just buy huge amounts of debt from, say, Sears or good creditors, and then will just sue everyone on their list, not necessarily have the proof to back up their claim that they actually owe the money, and bank on the fact that the people that they're suing many times will have no idea what they need to do and not do it. 20 days later, that debt collector can get a garnishment and freeze a person's bank account, take everything that's in there to satisfy that judgment. Many times it includes exorbitant interest rates. And so this service is partly in response to that. This service will help someone who's been sued by a debt collector serve an answer on the other side within the 20 days. So at least it's heard on the merits. At least there's a chance for that person to raise their case. And that's a statewide. Unfortunately, the requirements here are they need to have access to email and the ability to scan or fax. What we typically ask people to do is, go to their library or their local, what's it called, FedEx Kinko's, I guess, and do it that way. But I know that can be a barrier. We're working on ways to get around that, but at least for now. That way our attorneys can actually draft an answer, send it to them, and we'll even we often will do the service of process on the other side for the client too. Does that make sense? Any questions about that?
So is that something after those 20 days that the attorney can still help them if they didn't reply?
Oh, that is the big problem, is that, if it's after 20 days, we won't sign them up for our service. We will recommend that they go to the court's website and find the materials that will help them answer it themselves. But we've been really concerned about, if there's a delay where we say, okay, if you wait for our attorney, we'll help you, but then the default judgment comes, that'd be really bad. So typically, if it's beyond the 20 days, I would send them to the court's website. And I could provide you that link unless you might already have it.
Well, and remember, in your training materials, part of what Martha's talking about, so let's go to the first yellow folder or yellow division page after the second green tab. Okay, it's a little complicated. But remember when Zoe got sued by Fast Donnie, okay? And you have the summons here that has Fast Donnie's name on it against Zoe. Should be one of the very first attachments in, one of the very first attachments. And what Martha is talking about is on the paragraph 4 of the summons, it says if you don't answer, you're going to lose. And that's what this is all about. This is helping somebody not lose simply because of what's called default. That they, not that they refuse to answer, they just fail to answer because they don't understand the process. And now this goes back, remember, to what we've talked about. When people say, I've got this piece of paper, it doesn't even have a court stamp on it, because sometimes they don't. And I don't know if this is real or not. And remember, we're not going to give legal advice, but we do know if somebody gets something that says summons on them, we know that we have to say, pay attention to this, you need to talk to a lawyer, okay? And so what the lawsuit answering service is designed to do is to help somebody stop at least the default judgment against them for failing to answer the lawsuit. We still have the gap about once that's done, how these folks are helped after that, but that at least buys them time. It can buy them several months worth of time for them to be able to locate legal service or advice in some other way.
Right.
So very important. It's like an emergency process, emergency stopgap measure.
Right, it really is.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
Oh,
I
not
thought
at
it
all.
would
No,
be-
thank you. That's very helpful. And I guess, I'll just take this opportunity to say, what we see every day, and I think probably what you see too, is that the laws offer little protection to those who do not have access to a lawyer. So, for example, the law says, well, if there's a dispute, the court will hear both sides of that dispute before making a decision. That's a protection. If you're sued, you're protected against a decision being made without your input. But if you don't know how to do an answer in 20 days, it really doesn't matter. Or if your landlord doesn't return your security deposit, you can't just go over and take his $500 motorcycle in exchange for the $500. You have to go to court, you have to know how to file a petition, draft your petition, or get together your evidence, get ready to present your evidence, and that's really hard to do. And so, it's just, for me, so essential that we provide attorneys to people to everyone in our society, to make sure that the law's protections really do extend to everyone. I've done calculations where if you take everybody who lives in the state of Minnesota and you divide it by the number of attorneys in the state of Minnesota, there's one attorney for every 226 of us. And so to me, that seems about right. I mean, when you think about all the things you do that might involve the law, selling your house, or if you're in an accident, or, if you're getting married or getting divorced, or not married, but getting divorced, there's a lot. There's a lot that we need lawyers for. And, but if you take everyone in poverty in the state, and you divide it by the number of legal aid attorneys, it's one attorney for every 3,400 people in poverty. So 3,400 people. There's no way that one lawyer is going to guarantee the law's protections to 3,400 people. It's just a crisis. I mean, we have so many crises right now, but that's one that we see at VLN every day. And our whole community suffers when so many of us do not have access to justice. So that's my little...
You go, girl.
So something else that we assist with is criminal expungement, and we're looking for more people because we know they're out there and they need help. And actually, I'd like to take a break from this handout to now go to this handout, which is a screenshot of a website. So referring to VLN for criminal expungement issues is great. It might save somebody a phone call if you can actually give them information that is on this website, which is a website that we update constantly. So on this website, this is our VLN community clinics, and we include our criminal expungement seminars in there. I don't actually have the page up that you would look at, but if you were to go to VLN clinics, you would then see a list of issues, criminal expungement being one of them. You could click on criminal expungement, and then you would see the number of clinics where we offer criminal expungement services, and then you would see one of those highlighted, which is our main service. You'd click on that, you'd get the actual times and locations of our seminars. So if that's, I'd be happy to I could send you a series of screenshots actually that would get you there, because I know it's really hard to imagine that in a vacuum. But this website I would encourage you to use. It's one that we really are keeping updated. And in fact, the page that you have in front of you is the page that you would get if you clicked on VLN updates, because we know how hard it is to keep track of what we're doing. And so we just actually yesterday, in response to suggestions from your colleagues, I've created a web page that we will list when we change our services. A good rule of thumb is I would think it's really frustrating for me sometimes to keep up to date with what we're doing, and I can only imagine what it must be like for you. But I can tell you that it's very rare that we're taking services away. In general, you're not going to be telling somebody the wrong thing by telling them something that might be outdated. You just might not be telling them as much as what we're doing. So hopefully that is helpful. And then this sheet right here is posted on the link that I've circled, VLN Geographic Eligibility Reference Sheet. And so we'll be keeping that updated there. Okay, back to this handout where we're looking for more clients. Employment law phone advice anywhere in the state. If someone needs phone advice about an employment law issue, please refer them to us. We will help them. And we also have relationships with legal aid, so that we'll refer them to the appropriate legal aid if we're not able to help, in addition to what we're providing. Real estate and tax, both of those we're looking for more. Tax, it's just Minnesota Department of Revenue issues. Otherwise, the Legal Aid Tax Project will help them. See, I'm seeing the same.
So just state taxes.
State taxes, right.
Right. Well, Martha, but it's one of the reasons that we brought VLN here today, in the past, what we've done is we've dived into areas of the law and we've brought somebody here to talk about those areas, and then we go to our referral locations after that. VLN is different because the program is so comprehensive. It covers a lot of different bases. And the reason Martha is here is to help us to understand it further, and that's why it's entitled Diving Deep into VLN, our training session today. I think it's probably fair to say that it's going to, no one outside the agency is going to be able to wrap their arms entirely around it, but it is very important what we're hearing today because it does help make it clearer. You know, you're getting a better sense. And as you get towards the end where you talk more about what you have online and all that kind of stuff, I dare say that a year from now, when we're talking about VLN, we're going to be talking far more about what's online for them, and that makes it a lot easier because it'll just be directing people to an online place, and then your online stuff will be able to sort people out rather than us having to worry about that. So, okay.
That makes sense. And actually, I think even today, if someone is looking for legal advice, you could send them to our Clinics Wiki, which is the sheet that has the screenshot. And they can sort out, you know, where they might go. It's designed for our partner agencies, but I mean, many lay people could navigate it just fine, so that would be fine too. Are there any questions that people have right now? I've got, happy to answer anything that might be. Okay, so next one, please. Here is the chart showing the top areas of law that we provided services last year. This is for all services across the board. I think if we took, for example, just full representation service, it might be a little different. Bankruptcy and family would be top, but you can kind of see this really is pretty representative of the services that we're offering and the needs of the people that we're seeing. Okay. One really clear and bright rule I can give you is that a weakness of VLN, or something that we aren't able to respond to as well, is quick turnaround times. If someone has a deadline within the next 3 weeks, or a court hearing within the next 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks, if you refer them to us, we will get them phone advice. But even if they're eligible for full representation services, we may not be able to get them an attorney because it's just hard to get attorneys on short notice. It's like I look at my own calendar. If I'm scheduling something, it's hard to get me for, you know, the next week might be harder, but 4 weeks out, you know, I'm pretty free. It's the same with our attorneys. And so that's just one caution, kind of just that we're not as able to provide really fast services. Okay.
What is the typical turnaround for getting an attorney if someone needed it? I mean, is it?
Mm-hmm. It depends on the issue. At VLN, every area of law, there's some limit to our services, whether it's the volunteers, the staff, or the clients, why we're not providing more. But so, for example, in family law cases, for full representation services, they would be screened first, and then it might be 2 months, depending on the type of case. We'll often prioritize people who are responding to a divorce just because they have more quickly impending deadlines than a petitioner who could file in 3 or 4 months, and it won't be the end of the world unless there's some mitigating factor that makes it more urgent. Unemployment compensation cases we can probably panel within 2 weeks. That doesn't mean the attorney can be at a hearing in 2 weeks, but we will connect the client with the lawyer. The lawyer will be on the case within a couple weeks. Tax cases would be even shorter than that just because we have so many tax attorneys. The longest waits generally are going to be in bankruptcy and family. Shortest waits probably be employment, tax, some of the services that are on this sheet. And that's for full representation. For, as Ellie kind of alluded to earlier, the clinics, it's right away. You can walk into a clinic and that's immediate. That's pretty immediate. I would recommend, if people are going to a clinic, I would recommend that they get there as early as possible, because some of our more popular clinics, like the family law clinic, if you get there maybe at 8:30 or half an hour after it starts, it might be that there's already enough people signed up that the attorney will not be able to see them. So we have 3 intake options. One is, as you all know, our client intake line. Advantage is you get to talk to a live person, which is great. The disadvantage is it can be a while to wait, and they're somewhat limited. Our intake hours, 3 hours, 4 times a week. People who are working, people have other commitments, sometimes can't do that. And so we've recently now instituted our online intake for the 4 areas: bankruptcy, family, housing, criminal expungement. We will be adding more subjects to that. We just wanted to get something up as soon as possible, and we will be putting it in Spanish by the summer. And then finally, our walk-in clinics. We have received so many questions recently from so many partners. You know, what are you doing now? Really. And so we're really trying to be as clear as we can be. And so we recently created a eligibility tool where our partners can complete this tool to find out what services we offer. It's, you know, if you put in, for example, it'll ask you the issue, then it will ask you the first language of the person. It'll let you select between English, Spanish, and Somali for now. And then what level of service that they're looking for and where they live. Answer those questions, and it'll tell you what services we can provide. So I'd encourage you to just kind of play around on this and see, you know, and I don't know if it's fast enough that you could use it while you're on the phone, but, you know, it might be as a tool anyway. And then the next slide, there's the link for the online intake. And then if you have questions, please feel free to email me, really. Short questions I get back to right away. Sometimes not always to the longer ones, the full updates. But really, we really want to be good partners with you and help you make the right referrals, because we just know how important that is. So, okay. So this is the point where I would just ask you to tell me what are the areas that you see most? What do you want to hear most about? I mean, I'm happy to kind of go through the next about 10 slides and kind of go over with you what the eligibility is. My experience is that sometimes isn't the most exciting of presentations. So if there's, you know, areas that you have questions on, I'd be happy to deal with those first. Or I could tell you who all the pictures are. This is Glenn Drew. He's our resource attorney for civil issues. He's fantastic. All of our resource attorneys are fantastic. So I'll leave it up to however you prefer to spend the next 15 minutes or so. Or
let's see, do you guys have any questions at this point? What, have you had any perplexing calls lately where you didn't know where to send someone? And maybe this would be a good point to ask Martha if that would have been a good referral to VLN. You know, I mean, something about, you know, like horse law or... No?
I think I'll spend a moment on civil, if we can advance to one that says civil on the top. This one I think is the most, it's the most complicated for, and it also happens to be the one that Zoe has a problem with again. You know, civil is everything. I mean, there's criminal and there's civil, so it's a huge area. I mean, even, you know, family and housing are considered civil if you're a normal person looking at law. What we mean by civil is something that doesn't fall into the other areas like housing or family. But mainly for us, civil would be something like a car accident case, not a personal injury case, but something where there's someone's being sued for the debt of the damages from a car accident. The garnishment forms, we do a lot of those. How many of those do you see? Do you get a lot of people who call saying they need help with a garnishment form? Okay, yeah. That's unfortunate. I think many people don't realize what, you know, I've helped people with garnishment forms, and I'm, you know, I've done this before, and I still find them really hard, and I wish people knew that there was help for them. We also often will see the debt collectors suing for certain debt, whether it's a credit card or an uninsured hospital visit, unfortunately, or dentist. We'll help with those. We'll help with discovery. Have you heard of discovery, where it's like, you know, it's after the person is been served with the plaintiff, the summons and petition, and then the other side has answered it, then both sides have a chance to say, okay, show me what you got. What are you going to use to prove your case? And so we help with discovery on many issues.
How long does that process take?
It can, yeah, that's a really good question. That can take years, depending on the lawsuit, depending on the attorneys, depending on the issue. You know, in family law, usually I would say a well-run case discovery would last, gosh, 4 to 6 months. I think that was my experience in Wisconsin anyway.
At least 6 months.
6 months here, yeah. Actually, that's true. This is a bigger county than I practiced in Wisconsin, so, but it really does depend. So Zoe's case is a civil case.
Yeah, why don't we just talk a little bit about Zoe? Poor Zoe has gotten herself into trouble again, now of a romantic nature. You know, as we write here, 2 steps forward, 1 backward, and it all started with a man. Imagine that. And she met Jock Hudson, also nicknamed Rock, who convinced Zoe that it would be wonderful that she sign a guarantee for him to buy a brand new red Kia with leather seats and top-of-the-line Kia. So Zoe, of course, enamored with Rock, decided that she would do that. And then, believe it or not, Rock just went off and ran off with another woman to Vegas to get married. And unfortunately for Zoe, Rock lost control of the car and smashed into the church and the Chapel of Love and destroyed the car. Rock was nowhere to be found. There was no insurance on the car because Rock had failed to pay it. And now the bank, the lending company, aptly known We'll Get You Loans, has decided that it would want Zoe to have to pay up on the guarantee. So the question is, where would we send Zoe to deal with that problem? She's called in a panic. She's got a letter from We'll Get You Loans that's saying, we're coming after you. And she's come back to 211, her old buddies. So, Teresa, I'm sure that she gets a hold of you every time she calls, doesn't she? So what do you guys think? Where would we make a referral to Zoe?
Oh, now VLN.
Sounds like a civil issue.
Yeah.
It is a civil issue. So, and what I recommended, what do you have to say, Martha?
Well, I would recommend sending her to the Legal Access Point Clinic. And actually, it might not be VLN, even though that seems like it should have been the answer. It actually might be the Hennepin County component. So I think you're familiar with the Legal Access Point Clinic. It has 2 organizations staffing it. Volunteer Lawyers Network is one, and the Hennepin County Bar Association is the other one. And their shifts have no income restrictions. And there's also a site where you can look up the concentration of the practice of the attorneys on their shift. And so I meant to have that link for us today, but I can send that to you. It's a really nice link where you can see the schedule. And for the LRIS shifts, the schedule, it's great. They'll tell you what the lawyer's concentration is. For VLN shifts, we tend not to do that just because it's the larger firms and we don't know which attorney will be there on a given day. But, and I'd actually just like to say one other cautionary thing. The VLN shifts do not do family or criminal issues, whereas the LRIS shifts will. So I would send her to the LRIS component of the lab clinic.
Or at least the lab clinic.
The lab
regardless.
clinic, for sure,
Right.
yep.
Okay, and where else would you send her after that? Because we like to give her a couple of different referrals. How about the All Issues Clinic at CAPS, or we talked yesterday about, or at the Dignity Center, and then we talked about the Brian Coyle Center. with her going there, although the caveat was Brian Coyle serves a lot of Somali.
Right, we do try to keep that clinic more for Somali speakers because it's our only clinic at which we have people willing and usually available to interpret for the clients.
So, and that's another side note here. If you get Somali callers and they need to talk to somebody, immediately send them to the Brian Coyle Center. So,
I think I'd like to end by showing you this slide and hopefully giving you a little more hope than I think you might have right now. I think
that's
for
a
me,
hopeful group. Don't worry about that.
I think for me, it really, if I were to boil this presentation down, I know we kind of dived deep, but I think this is really kind of the bottom line for me. And actually, there's a number 6 that I'm going to ask you to write in on your own handouts. But the income eligibility cheat sheet is a really helpful tool. Once you see if we can help with that, then you can go to the handout that Ellie created that shows you the detail of the service that we provide. I myself will use FormStack, the eligibility guide. Even though I created it, I will still use it to remind myself. And this will have, again, the county, the income level, the language, and the issue. And so you can see what services we'll offer for any given set of criteria. Of course, our phone numbers, and then the online intake. But what I would ask you to add as a number 6 is the information on slide 17, which is the URL for our clinics wiki. Because our clinics wiki, and I wish I'd thought of this soon enough to put it in the main body of the materials, it has all of our VLN clinic information on there. It has, on the VLN services link, if you click on that, it will bring just a general overview of what we do and what we don't do, and then a link to the eligibility wiki, the eligibility tool. So I think, it's so much to remember, and I so appreciate and value and respect all that you remember on a daily basis. For VLN, I think I would just try to remember those 6 things as tools that might be able to help.
Martha, could you elaborate a little bit more on this wiki clinic?
Mm-hmm.
This
Sure.
is something that's new.
It is new. Probably could have put it as an update on it itself. Right, so the clinics wiki was designed as a result of our community partners coming to us and saying, we want to be able to communicate with you more easily. We want to know what you do. We want you to know what we do. We want to be able to cross-refer. Let's be partners. And so in response, we created this wiki. And a wiki basically is a tool that's meant to be updated, shared, modified. So any VLN volunteer attorney or any partner in the community that which we have a clinic site can update this. And we can update it really easily. And so this tool, I think, is quickly becoming a really nice support for our partners to try to figure out whether VLN is a good place to refer. And so I'll just, the links on the left, I'll just go through really quickly. The welcome, it kind of says what the wiki is. The resources for attorneys are more like what the attorneys need to provide services at a clinic.
You're now referring to the one
Oh, sorry,
single-page
this
handout
one.
that we have.
Yep.
With the
very
wiki
last.
address up on the right with the arrow. Okay.
Yeah, thank
Yep.
you.
Yep.
And then the VLN clinics, this is the one where if you click on VLN clinics, it will bring up a list of issues. And you can click on the issue to see what clinics can provide a service on that issue. I wish we just don't have internet here, but
It's resources for attorneys and community partners. And then it's a resource for callers in that they can get information on clinics.
pretty much anyone could. It's not designed for callers. Typically, if I were
Not
designing,
designed for
right,
caller, okay.
and all that is to say is that we didn't write it, like we try to write plain English more.
Right.
We didn't do that for this. This is more for our partners and our colleagues,
Okay.
our volunteer attorneys, our social service partners. So,
Okay.
but you
But,
can,
but go ahead and refer the callers.
yeah. If you think a caller is pretty, able to navigate and has access to the internet. You could refer them to this, absolutely.
And that referral would be, you can find information on clinics, their services.
Yep, yep, their locations, we have a link to a map to all of our clinics.
Right, and we talk about it on page 7 of your training material. We have the wiki address right there.
Yep.
So just, I mean,
Okay.
keep
Yeah.
going though, you're doing
Yeah.
a great job.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's, oh, and then so the other, the other legal, this is where we refer to when we can't help someone. Social services is when our attorneys are looking for a social service to help a client. Although we tell them first to call you, actually, but they also have this information. Partner agencies, that's just our partners with their websites. And then the VLN updates would be the other page that might be helpful to you.
And Martha, how would this be different on the clinics compared to what lawhelpmn.org has with its clinics postings?
Right.
Or are the two of you corresponding with each other?
All of our updates we give to Law Help. I mean, that's such a good site. That is my favorite site in the world. I mean, it's just such a good, easily navigable, plain English site that clients and attorneys can read easily. I think the VLN wiki site is able to provide more comprehensive information about the VLN clinics, in part because Law Help is doing it for everybody, and so there has to be a specific format that it fits in, and we're able to just kind of say what we do without trying to fit it into that format, if that makes sense. And the other big difference is that our page is not trying to educate people about the law, whereas Law Help is just this amazing resource to educate lay people and attorneys about the law in Minnesota on issues of poverty.
And so my recommendation is if you're going to give out the wiki referral here, I would also make sure your fallback referral is also about Law Help, okay? Bearing in mind that we could overwhelm the callers with data about websites, but I think that it's important that they know both of them are out there, they both offer something. The thing that I think that is most important, your best takeaway today about VLN is this. Your best takeaway is listed on what we've put on page 5 and 6 of the training material, which are the walk-in clinics. To go back to what I said earlier, with the callers who are in distress, who are stressed out, in panicking over something, you have something you can give them that gets them to talk to a lawyer quickly, relatively quickly in the scheme of the world. And that is a great value. That is, in my view, one of the largest values that VLN offers our community. I mean, you offer a lot of things, but I think that that is a wonderful thing for people to be able to connect with a lawyer.
Is there a limit to the amount of times someone could go there to a walk-in clinic?
You mean the number of times they can go? I'll let you answer that.
Sure. In general, if a person is coming with different issues, there's no limit. So and even if they're coming with different issues on the same case, so maybe I come the first time for help with an answer, the second time I come for help with answering requests for admissions, the third time I come for help on something else, that's okay. We do have some people who come more than once or twice on the same issue, and maybe it's not even a legal issue, or they're trying to keep coming enough until they find an attorney who gives them the answer that they want. So there are clients that we will ban from our clinics actually and say, I'm sorry, we can't serve you anymore. For example, if someone has received, I forget now exactly what it's called, but the Hennepin County courts every now and then will ban a person from, oh gosh, I can't remember how they phrase it, because obviously you can't ban someone from their basic right to sue, but they ban them from something.
Well, it would be about frivolous litigation. It would be about meritorious litigation. There are, I've been a lawyer for 31 years, practiced trial law for 28, and there are people who engage in frivolous litigation. I mean, I at one point represented somebody who had single-handedly filed more prisoner lawsuits. It was a prisoner who had single-handedly filed more prisoner lawsuits than any other prisoner in America. Okay? So, and merited a write-up in an adult journal as a result of that. So, so there are people that have that, and the court system needs to help deal with that in some way. But if I might add, I think that the reality is if somebody has a legitimate issue, a legitimate thing going on, I think that the LAP attorneys and the attorneys at the clinics are human beings. I mean, that's why we became lawyers. And I think that in many instances, they're going to be compassionate and empathetic towards whomever walks in the door. And that is the way we want it, isn't it? So.
I do have a question. I'm just curious, again, just to ask you, how many times do you get calls for people that are looking for help in answering a lawsuit? Is that very frequent or not very frequent? Not real frequent. What's the most common legal issue that you see?
Divorce,
Child custody
child custody, family law.
and bankruptcy. I'll get a lot of calls for people looking for help with bankruptcy.
So bankruptcy, family, and housing. And for housing, is it like eviction actions, or is it?
Eviction, repairs, those kind of things.
Oh, repairs, yeah.
Landlord-tenant issues.
Yeah.
Right. And we had Larry McDonough come and train us over the summer on landlord-tenant law, which continues to be one of our most popular trainings. We'll be bringing Larry back in 2013. So.
Housing, I was going to say that housing is a pretty easy referral. That's, for me, I mean, that's, if it's Hennepin County, it's the Housing Court project. That's a really easy referral. But yeah, bankruptcy and family we do the services, but they may be waiting a little bit.
I think we get a number of calls for expungements. Do you guys?
Calls for expungements?
Usually it's housing expungements, though.
Yeah.
Like they want to expunge a UD. So
Interesting, which is hard. It's hard to do. Good. Okay.
Well, we have about 10 minutes left. Do you have any other questions for Martha?
I had a call that I thought of that I wasn't sure what type of law it might have been. I had a caller that had debt collectors chasing her, not only on her private line, but also at work at the hospital she was at, and she was being warned from her at the hospital that if these calls didn't continue, she may lose her employment. And I wasn't sure if that was considered employment law, if it was consumer law, necessarily where that was. That I gave her some places, like the Minnesota Department of Labor and Industry, just so she could know maybe what her rights were, but I really wasn't clear on what type of law that might have been.
Oh yeah, that is a hard one. The first thing that occurs to me is that, and only because I've been searching for ways to try to make this more public knowledge, that if the entity calling her was a debt collector, the first thing I would do is recommend that she speak with a consumer rights attorney about a FDCPA claim, Federal Debt Collection Practices Act claim. It's actually, it's unfortunately something that VLN doesn't do. And the reason we don't do it is because it's a contingency fee case. But that's also a good thing, because that means if someone has a claim, it won't be hard for them to find a lawyer. And I'd actually like to give you a website to look at about that. I don't know if does that come up a lot? Where people are being harassed by creditors and they just want it to stop, they don't know what to do?
Has.
Yeah, so the website is www.naca.net, NACA.net. And it's the, National Association of Consumer Attorneys or something like that. And I would look on that site under Minnesota, under Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, and you'll get a list of attorneys who practice in that area. Because actually, depending on the specific case, she probably would have a claim against that debt collector, because debt collectors are not supposed to call you at work. I would probably have, the other thing would be to send her to LAP, and I think the attorney there would know it. We have another tool specifically to see if someone might have a FDCPA Collections Practices Act, because it's so rampant. But it's one of those issues where people don't know they have a legal issue, unfortunately. But there are certain limits to what a debt collector is allowed to do under law, and they really push those limits a lot of times. So NACA.net, and then if you're interested, I'd be more than happy to send you the tool that we provide to clients so that they can see whether or not they might have an FDCPA claim. In fact, it would be, no, I better not do it from memory. I think it's www.formstack.com/forms/VLN-FDCPA. And if it's not that, I'll send you the correct link.
And we'll verify. Jillian's taken notes, and we'll get you the notes of the training. There's a couple of other things that I'd like to mention, just so that we're aware. One of the differences about sending people to the LAP clinic or to the family court clinic versus calling VLN and scheduling an appointment with them through VLN, through one of their clinics, is that VLN needs the paperwork in advance. And that is something you should make sure the callers are aware of as they're getting a hold of VLN, because there are hoops that they may need to go through. They may either have to deliver the copies of the paperwork to VLN, or they need to scan them, or somehow to be able to do that. And we know that with some of the callers, even affording copy costs may be a problem for them. So just be aware of that, and but it's one of the requirements that VLN have the paperwork in advance before they can talk to them give them advice on the telephone. Right?
Actually, I have a little caveat to that, actually, which is that many phone advice services can go ahead without the paperwork.
Oh, great.
But whether you're at a clinic or phone advice, yeah, I would really put in a plug for them to bring paperwork, because if they want to know how to get to point B, the attorney can't do as good of a job telling them that without knowing where they are right now. It's like when you're looking for directions, you always have to put in where you are now and where you want to go. And the attorney doesn't know where they are now unless they have the paperwork. So to the extent possible, please encourage them. And if they don't have the paperwork, sometimes at our clinics we can get it. If it's at the courthouse clinic, we can sometimes get it ourselves. But
you would not be able to get letters and things
Right.
like that from third parties. The other thing is just in the training materials, what I've attempted to do is, help make this easy. And so obviously Spanish-speaking clients, as we went over, just send them to Lorette, and the number is on page 2 of the training material. And then we tried to separate out the training materials on the basis of scheduled clinics or workshops or walk-in, where you can do drop-ins. So on page 4 and 4, 5, and the top of 6, we talk about the clinics that are simply walk-in, and we've categorized them alphabetically in terms of topic. And then the clinics that they must call on advance are on pages 6 and the top of 7. Again, just hopefully, and all of these clinics are in your database, but hopefully if you need to be trying to figure something out, you can just go to the training material and tab 10 and then open up and say, okay, yeah, this is a walk-in clinic, all right? Apart from that, we are just about out of time. Does anybody have any other last questions for Martha? Well, Martha, I just want to thank you very much for your time here today. It was extremely helpful. It was good diving, and we look forward to learning more about VLN as it goes forward and being able to utilize more of the resources that will be online.
Wow.
So everyone, let's thank Martha for her time.
I want to thank you for your dedication to trying to get it right and all the effort that you make every day. You're really the heroes on our front lines, helping people get to where they need to go. So it's really a pleasure being here.
I would echo that. We have some we have a lot of very smart people at 211 who really help make things work for everyone. And on that note, we will go off for today's session.